The lamplight flickering through the barn slats at midnight told Katherine Bishop something was terribly wrong, and when she crept closer through the September darkness of 1882, she heard her husband's voice promising to hand over their ranch deed by Friday. Katherine pressed her back against the weathered wood, her heart hammering so hard she feared the two men inside might hear it over their own plotting. She had risen from bed to fetch water, noticed the light, and followed it out of pure instinct. Now she wished she had stayed ignorant. "The whole spread, Richard." The unfamiliar voice was rough, calculated. 300 acres, the house, everything? "Everything," her husband, Richard Bishop, confirmed. "I have debts you do not know about, Mr. Sutton. Gambling debts in Virginia City that will see me dead if I do not pay. The ranch will cover it, and you will get prime land for half what it is worth." Katherine's hands flew to her mouth. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of building this ranch from nothing, and he was selling it out from under her without a word. Her father had given them the starting capital as a wedding gift. She had worked alongside Richard every day, her hands as calloused as any cowhand's, her back as strong, her determination unwavering. This land was as much hers as his, more so since she had been the one to truly love it. "Friday, then," Sutton said. "I will have the cash. You have the deed ready." "It will be ready." Katherine fled back to the house before they could emerge, her mind racing faster than her feet. She slipped into bed and feigned sleep when Richard returned an hour later, reeking of whiskey and cigar smoke. Beside her in the darkness, he was a stranger. Perhaps he always had been. Morning came with its usual demands. Katherine went through the motions of breakfast, watching Richard across the table as though seeing him for the first time. He was handsome enough, with dark hair and sharp features, but there was a weakness around his mouth she had never let herself acknowledge. He caught her staring. "Something wrong?" he asked. "No," she lied. "Just thinking about the cattle we need to move to the north pasture. I will handle it later." He never would. Richard had grown increasingly distant from the actual work of ranching over the past year, spending more time in Virginia City, coming home with empty pockets and vague explanations. She had made excuses for him, covered for him, worked twice as hard to compensate. What a fool she had been. After he rode out, claiming business in town, Katherine saddled her mare and headed for the northern boundary of their property. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to save everything she had built. The land rolled out before her in golden waves of prairie grass, dotted with sage and the occasional juniper. The September sun was warm but not brutal, and the breeze carried the scent of earth and possibility. She found one of their cowhands mending fence near the creek, a tall man named Kieran Fletcher, who had signed on 6 months ago. He was perhaps 28 or 26 years, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that curled at his collar. He was quiet, competent, and she had noticed he did the work of 2 men without complaint. "Morning, Mrs. Bishop," he said, touching his hat brim. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, like storm clouds over the mountains. "Morning, Kieran." She dismounted, leading her mare to drink. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He set down his tools, giving her his full attention. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel less alone for the first time since last night's discovery. "How much do you know about land deeds and property law?" His expression shifted, grew more serious. "Enough to know that is not a casual question. What is wrong?" Katherine had not intended to tell him, had planned to keep her crisis private, but something in his direct gaze loosened her tongue. "If I tell you, it does not leave this conversation. Can you promise me that?" "You have my word." So she told him. Everything. The words tumbled out in a rush about the overheard conversation, Richard's gambling debts, the planned sale to Sutton, her own helplessness in the face of laws that gave her husband control over property she had worked to build. By the end, her voice was shaking and tears threatened, but she blinked them back furiously. Kieran listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the land. "I knew a woman once who lost everything the same way," he finally said. "My sister. Her husband sold their home and left her with nothing. She had 3 children and nowhere to go. The law did not care that she had worked herself near to death for that home." He turned back to Katherine. "I will not stand by and watch it happen again. Not if there is something I can do to stop it." "What can we do?" He has the right to sell. I am just his wife." "Just?" Kieran's voice held an edge. "You are the heart of this ranch, Mrs. Bishop. Everyone who works here knows it. Your husband shows up to collect the profits of your labor, but you are the one who makes this place run." The truth of it settled over her like a cloak. She had known it, but hearing someone else say it aloud made it real, made it matter. There might be a way," Kieran continued slowly, thinking it through as he spoke. "If we can prove he is selling under duress, or if we can get the creditors paid off before the sale, the deal falls through. Do you have access to any funds he does not know about?" Catherine's mind raced. "My mother left me some money. Richard thinks I spent it on household goods over the years, but I saved most of it, maybe $300. That is a start. How much does he owe?" "I do not know exactly, but enough that he is selling a ranch worth at least $3,000 for $1,500. Kieran let out a low whistle. "That is desperate. We need to find out exactly who he owes and how much. Then we need to figure out if we can pay them off or negotiate." He paused. "I have some money saved. Not much, but I can contribute." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking. I am offering." His gaze held hers. "This land deserves better than to be gambled away, and so do you." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. Katherine looked away first, her pulse fluttering in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "We have until Friday," she said. 3 days. Then we better get started." They agreed that Kieran would ride into Virginia City that afternoon, discreetly asking questions in the gambling halls about Richard Bishop's debts. Katherine would search the house for any papers or documents that might give them more information. They would meet again that evening after Richard had gone to bed. Back at the ranch house, Katherine waited until Richard left for his daily trip to town before beginning her search. She felt like a criminal, rifling through her own husband's belongings, but anger overrode guilt. He was the one betraying their vows, their partnership, their future. In his desk, hidden beneath a false bottom she discovered by accident, she found a stack of IOUs and demands for payment. Her stomach turned as she tallied the amounts. Richard owed nearly $800 to various gambling establishments and individuals in Virginia City. It was a staggering sum, but not impossible. Not if she was willing to risk everything. She found something else, too. Letters from Sutton, dating back 3 months. The sale had been planned for far longer than she had realized. Richard had been negotiating behind her back all summer, agreeing to terms that would leave them homeless. The betrayal cut deeper with each page she read. The last letter mentioned Sutton's real plans for the property. He intended to strip it, sell the cattle, tear down the buildings, and resell the land in parcels to incoming settlers. Everything Katherine had built would be destroyed for profit. That evening, Katherine made Richard's favorite supper and watched him eat it, playing the dutiful wife while hatred simmered in her chest. He complimented the roast, asked about her day with feigned interest, and excused himself early to bed. She waited an hour, then slipped out to meet Kieran by the creek as planned. He was already there, leaning against a cottonwood tree, his horse grazing nearby. The moon was nearly full, turning the landscape silver in shadow. "I found the IOUs," Katherine said without preamble. $780 total, and letters proving he has been planning this for months. Kieran's expression darkened. "I found the men he owes, 3 gambling hall owners and 2 private individuals. Rough characters, the kind who make examples of people who do not pay. Your husband made some very poor choices. Can we pay them? Between your $300 and my savings, we have about $500. We need more." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There is one more option. We could go directly to these creditors and offer them a deal. Pay them in installments, with interest. Most men would rather have guaranteed money over time than chase a debtor who might disappear. Would they agree? Depends on how desperate they are and how much they want to avoid trouble. Some of these men operate outside the law. They might appreciate a clean resolution." He met her eyes. "But we would have to convince them that you are good for the money, not your husband. That means revealing what he is planning." Katherine understood the implications. She would be going against Richard publicly, humiliating him, possibly ending their marriage. But what marriage did they really have? He had already ended it when he decided to sell their life without telling her. "When do we go?" "Tomorrow. We will need to move fast if we want to beat Friday's deadline." They rode for Virginia City at dawn. telling the other ranch hands they had business in town. The journey took 3 hours on horseback, following the dusty road that wound through increasingly barren country. Virginia City sprawled across the side of Mount Davidson, a chaotic mess of buildings and people drawn by the Comstock Lode silver strike 20 years earlier. The boom was fading now, but the town still thrummed with the energy of desperation and opportunity. Kieran led her through streets crowded with miners, merchants, and gamblers, past saloons that never closed, and houses with drawn curtains in broad daylight. Katherine felt eyes on her everywhere. Respectable women did not come to Virginia City alone, and even with Kieran at her side, she drew attention. Their first stop was a gambling hall called the Silver Queen. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of stale beer. Men hunched over card tables looked up as they entered, their gazes lingering on Katherine with open speculation. "I need to speak with the owner," Kieran told the bartender, his voice carrying quiet authority. "What about?" "A debt." The bartender jerked his head toward a back room. They found the owner, a heavyset man named McNally, counting money at a desk. He looked up with irritation that shifted to interest when he saw Katherine. "Mrs. Bishop," he said, recognizing her, "come to pay your husband's tab?" "I have come to make a deal," Katherine replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Kieran stood slightly behind her, a reassuring presence. She laid out her proposal. She would pay Richard's debt to McNally over the next 6 months with 10% interest in exchange for forgiving the immediate demand for payment. In return, McNally would provide her with a signed statement that Richard's debt to him was satisfied, pending her payments. McNally studied her for a long moment. "Why should I trust you over him?" "Because I am the one who actually runs the ranch that will pay you. Because I have never walked away from a debt in my life. And because if you force this sale, you will never see a penny. The buyer intends to flip the property, and my husband will drink whatever money he gets within a month." The truth of that hung in the air. McNally finally nodded. 6 months, but if you miss a payment, I come for the whole amount." "Agreed." They repeated the process at 2 more establishments, each negotiation leaving Katherine more drained but more determined. By afternoon, they had agreements from 4 of the 5 creditors. The last was a private individual, a man named Garrett who operated out of a boarding house on the edge of town. Garrett was younger than Katherine expected, perhaps 35, with cold eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. He listened to their proposal without expression. "No," he said flatly. "Bishop owes me $300. I want it now, or I take it out of his hide. That is the deal." "He cannot pay you now," Katherine said, "and if you hurt him, you still will not have your money." "Then I will take the ranch." "The ranch is not his alone to give." Garrett's smile was unpleasant. "The law says different, sweetheart." Kieran stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "The lady is offering you a fair deal. You would be wise to take it." "That a threat, Cowboy?" The tension in the room coiled tight. Katherine put a hand on Kieran's arm. "Please," she said to Garrett, hating the pleading in her voice but using it anyway. "I am offering you more than you are owed. $300 plus interest over 6 months is better than hunting a man who will disappear the moment he has cash in hand." Something shifted in Garrett's expression. Perhaps he heard the desperation, or perhaps he simply calculated the odds. Finally, he shrugged. "Fine. But first missed payment, I am coming for you." Katherine forced herself to nod. "Understood." They left Virginia City as the sun began its descent, both exhausted but victorious. 4 signed agreements, 1 verbal promise, and a clear path forward. All they needed now was to present these to Richard before Friday. "You were incredible today," Kieran said as they rode. "I've never seen anyone negotiate like that. I was terrified every moment." "I could not tell." He looked at her with something like admiration. "You saved your ranch today, Mrs. Bishop." "We saved it," she corrected. "I could not have done this without you." "Then we make a good team." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Katherine felt it settle over her, warm and complicated. She was a married woman, but her marriage was a shell. And Kieran Fletcher, this quiet cowboy who had appeared 6 months ago and asked only for honest work, had become the partner she had always needed. They reached the ranch after dark. Richard's horse was in the barn, which meant confrontation was imminent. Katherine dismounted on shaking legs, the adrenaline of the day finally catching up with her. "Do you want me to come with you?" Kieran asked. "No, this is something I need to do alone." "I will be in the bunkhouse if you need me." Katherine walked to the house with the signed agreements folded in her pocket. She found Richard in the parlor, drunk and angry. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Virginia City." His face went pale. "Why?" "I know about the debts, Richard. I know about the sale. I know everything." For a moment he looked like he might deny it, but then his expression hardened. "You had no right to go through my things." "I had every right. This is my ranch as much as yours." "The law says different." "The law is wrong." Katherine pulled out the papers. "I made deals with your creditors. They have agreed to payment plans. The immediate threats are gone, which means you have no reason to sell." Richard stared at the documents, his hands trembling. "How did you get the money?" "That is none of your concern. What matters is the sale is off." "Like hell it is." His voice turned vicious. "You are my wife. You do not get to make decisions about my property." "Our property." "Mine." He hurled his glass against the wall, and Katherine flinched despite herself. "I am the man. I am the one who holds the deed, and I will do what I damn well please with it." "Then our marriage is over." The words surprised her as much as they surprised him, but once spoken, she knew they were true. There was no going back from this, no pretending everything was fine. Richard laughed, ugly and sharp. "You cannot leave me. Where would you go? What would you do? You are nothing without me." "I am everything without you," Katherine said quietly. "I am the one who built this ranch while you drank away our future. I am the one who kept the books, hired the hands, made every decision that mattered. You were just the name on the deed." "Get out," Richard snarled. "Get out of my house. It is my house, too." He moved toward her, and Katherine stepped back, suddenly afraid. But before Richard could reach her, the door opened and Kieran stepped through, his presence filling the room. "Mrs. Bishop," he said calmly, "is everything all right?" Richard spun on him. "This is none of your business, cowhand. Get out." "I work for Mrs. Bishop," Kieran replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." The two men faced each other, and Katherine saw Richard calculate his chances. Drunk and out of shape, he was no match for a man who spent every day doing hard physical labor. He knew it too. "This is not over," Richard said to Katherine. "You have not won." But the fight had gone out of him. He stumbled past them, grabbed a bottle from the kitchen, and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door. Katherine found herself trembling, the fear and anger finally breaking through her composure. Kieran guided her to a chair, his hand steady on her shoulder. Are you hurt?" "No, just shaken." She looked up at him. "Thank you for coming. I thought I could handle it alone." "You did handle it. I was just backup." They sat in the quiet parlor while Katherine's heartbeat slowly returned to normal. Outside, night insects sang their familiar chorus, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, normal ranch sounds, ordinary life. But everything had changed. "What happens now?" Kieran asked. "I do not know, but I cannot stay married to him, not after this. Divorce is difficult." "I know." Katherine had heard of women who tried to leave their husbands, the legal battles and social stigma that followed, but staying felt impossible. "Maybe he will agree to an annulment if I give him something he wants." "Like what?" "I do not know yet, but there has to be a way." Over the next 2 days, an uneasy truce settled over the ranch. Richard stayed drunk and distant, sleeping in the guest room and avoiding Katherine entirely. She threw herself into work, rising before dawn to check cattle, mend fences, and handle the dozens of tasks that kept a ranch functioning. Kieran was often beside her, helping without being asked, his quiet competence a balm to her frayed nerves. Thursday evening, as they were bringing the horses in for the night, Katherine found herself confiding in him again. "My father always wanted me to marry well," she said, brushing down her mare. "He thought Richard was a good match because he came from a respectable family with money. But money does not make a man good." "No," Kieran agreed. "It just makes a bad man more dangerous." "Do you have family, Kieran, besides your sister?" "Parents who passed when I was young. The sister I mentioned, Ellen, and her children. They are back in Missouri doing better now. I send them money when I can." Is that why you work so hard? For them? Partly, and partly because I do not know any other way to be. He paused in his work, looking at her across the stable. My father always said a man is measured by what he builds, not what he inherits. I try to live by that. Your father sounds like he was wise. He was a ranch hand, too, and worked himself to death for other people's dreams. I swore I would not do the same, but here I am. He smiled slightly. Though this feels different somehow. Different how? Like maybe I'm building something that matters. Their eyes met, and Katherine felt the pull between them, stronger now, harder to ignore. She was still married, still bound by laws and vows, but her heart had already made its choice. Kieran seemed to read it in her face because he looked away first, clearing his throat. We should get back to the house. Tomorrow is Friday. Friday dawned gray and threatening, with clouds rolling in from the mountains. Katherine woke early, her stomach in knots. Sutton was supposed to arrive by noon with cash to finalize the sale. She had the signed agreements from the creditors, proof that Richard's debts were handled, but she did not know if it would be enough to stop him. She found Richard already awake, dressed in his best suit, looking haggard but determined. You need to call off Sutton, Katherine said. I am not calling off anything. Richard, please. I negotiated with your creditors. You do not need to do this. I need the money, Katherine, not just for the debts, for a fresh start somewhere else. The admission hung between them. He wanted out of the marriage as much as she did. Then let us make a deal, Katherine said carefully. I will buy your half of the ranch, give you enough to start over somewhere else, and you sign over your interest to me. The ranch is not worth enough for that kind of split. Then we will sell the cattle, keep the land. I can rebuild. Richard considered this, and for a moment Katherine thought she had him. Then he shook his head. Sutton's offer is better, cleaner. I am sorry, Katherine. The sale is happening. An hour before noon, Sutton arrived in a fancy carriage with armed men flanking him. He was a thin man with a sharp face and expensive clothes, looking utterly out of place against the rustic ranch buildings. Bishop, he greeted Richard with false warmth. Ready to conclude our business? I am, Katherine stepped forward. Mr. Sutton, I am Katherine Bishop. I own half this ranch by right of marriage and labor, and I am telling you this sale is not legitimate. Sutton's smile was patronizing. Mrs. Bishop, I appreciate your concern, but the deed is in your husband's name alone. He has every legal right to sell. He is selling under duress, gambling debts that have been threatening him. Many men sell property to settle debts. That does not make it illegal. Katherine pulled out her papers. Those debts are settled. He has no reason to sell now. That is his decision to make, not yours. Sutton turned to Richard. Shall we complete the transaction? Richard nodded, not meeting Katherine's eyes. They moved toward the house where the deed was kept, and Katherine felt everything slipping away despite her efforts. Then Kieran appeared, riding hard from the direction of town, dust billowing behind him. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped. Mrs. Bishop, you need to see this. He handed her a document, an official-looking paper with stamps and signatures. Katherine scanned it quickly, her heart leaping. What is that? Richard demanded. A lien, Katherine read aloud, her voice shaking. Filed this morning against Richard Bishop by the Territory of Nevada for unpaid taxes on this property, totaling $215. She looked at her husband. You have not been paying the property taxes. Richard's face went white. That is a mistake. No mistake, Kieran said. I checked with the county office yesterday. You are 18 months behind. With a lien on the property, you cannot legally sell until the taxes are paid. Sutton snatched the document, reading it himself. His expression soured. This is unfortunate, Bishop. I cannot purchase property with a lien. I will pay the taxes, Richard said desperately. Take it out of the sale price. That is not how this works. Sutton was already moving toward his carriage. Get this cleared up, then contact me. Maybe we can do business. Wait. But Sutton was gone, his carriage rattling away, leaving Katherine and Richard facing each other in the dusty yard. You did this, Richard accused her. You filed that lien somehow. The lien was real, Kieran interjected. We just made sure the county enforced it today. Richard looked between them, understanding dawning. You two are working together against me. We are working to save this ranch, Katherine corrected. Now you have a choice. Let me buy you out properly, or we all go down together when the county seizes the land for unpaid taxes." It took another hour of negotiation, but eventually Richard agreed. Katherine would pay him $800, half from her savings and half borrowed against future cattle sales, in exchange for his signed release of all claims to the ranch. Kieran rode to town to fetch a lawyer to draw up the papers, and by evening it was done. Richard packed a single bag and left that night, riding toward Virginia City without a goodbye. Katherine watched him go from the porch, feeling nothing but relief. "Are you all right?" Kieran asked, joining her. "I am free," Katherine said. "For the first time in 5 years, I am free." The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work and reorganization. Katherine officially became the sole owner of the ranch, filing the necessary papers and paying off the tax lien. The other ranch hands, once they understood what had happened, pledged their loyalty to her. She was a woman running a ranch alone, which was unusual, but not unheard of in Nevada Territory in 1882. Some neighbors gossiped, but most respected the work she did. Kieran became her unofficial foreman, managing the day-to-day operations and helping her make decisions about the ranch's future. They worked from dawn until long after dark most days, planning how to rebuild after the financial strain of buying out Richard and settling his debts. October brought cooler weather and the need to prepare for winter. Katherine and Kieran spent long hours checking fences, moving cattle to better grazing, and stockpiling supplies. It was during one of these long days, fixing a section of fence near the creek, that something shifted between them again. "Hand me that wire," Katherine said, and Kieran passed it to her, their fingers brushing. The contact was brief but electric. They both froze, the air between them suddenly charged. "Katherine," Kieran said softly. It was the first time he had used her given name. "I am still married," she said, though her heart was pounding. "Legally, at least. The divorce will take time." "I know, but I do not feel married. I feel like I am finally becoming myself." "You've always been yourself. You just had someone trying to diminish you." He stepped closer. "I see you, Katherine. I see how strong you are, how capable, how beautiful. I've seen it since the day I arrived." "Why did you come here?" she asked. "To this ranch, 6 months ago." "I heard about a woman who needed good help, who treated her workers fairly. I thought it sounded like a place worth staying." He smiled slightly. "I was right." Katherine set down her tools, her hands trembling. "I should not want this. It is too soon, too complicated. Life is always complicated. If we do this, people will talk. They will say terrible things. Let them talk." He cupped her face in his calloused hands, giving her every chance to pull away. But Katherine did not want to pull away. She wanted to lean into the warmth and strength he offered, wanted to claim the happiness she had been denied for so long. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and answer all at once. Then it deepened, becoming something fierce and needful. Katherine felt tears on her cheeks, though whether from joy or relief she could not say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said. "I have been for months. I tried not to be, but I cannot help it." "I love you too." The words came easily, naturally. "Is that wrong?" "Nothing about this feels wrong to me." They held each other beside the creek while the October sun painted the sky orange and gold. For the first time in years, Katherine felt hope blooming in her chest, warm and certain. But loving each other and being together were two different things. Katherine's divorce proceedings began in November, and as predicted, they were brutal. Richard contested everything, claiming abandonment and infidelity despite being the one who left. The fact that Katherine was running the ranch successfully seemed to enrage him more than anything else. The case went before a judge in Carson City in early December. Katherine had to testify about Richard's gambling, the attempted sale, the debts and lies. She had to stand in front of a courtroom full of strangers and detail the most painful parts of her marriage. Kieran sat in the back, his presence a steady comfort. Richard's lawyer tried to paint Katherine as an unfaithful wife who had seduced a ranch hand to steal her husband's property. It was ugly and humiliating, but Katherine held her ground. "I saved the ranch my husband tried to sell," she testified. "I paid his debts and did the work he abandoned. If loving someone who actually values me is a crime, then I am guilty. but I will not apologize for choosing a life over a marriage that was already dead." The judge, an older man named Henderson, listened to all the testimony before making his ruling. "It is clear to this court that the marriage between Richard and Katherine Bishop was broken beyond repair," he said. "It is also clear that Mrs. Bishop has been the true steward of the property in question. Therefore, I grant the divorce and confirm Katherine Bishop as sole owner of the ranch. Mr. Bishop's claims of abandonment and infidelity are dismissed as unsubstantiated." Katherine nearly collapsed with relief. Kieran was beside her instantly, supporting her, and for once she did not care who saw. They returned to the ranch on a cold December afternoon. Snow was falling lightly, dusting the land in white. Katherine stood on her porch, looking out at the property that was finally truly hers. "What now?" Kieran asked. "Now we build something better, together." "Together sounds good." Christmas came quietly that year. Katherine and Kieran decorated the ranch house with pine boughs and shared a simple meal with the other hands. It was not fancy, but it was honest, and Katherine found more joy in it than in all the Christmases of her marriage. On Christmas night, after everyone else had retired to the bunkhouse, Kieran gave her a small wrapped package. "I did not get you anything," Katherine said, embarrassed. "You gave me a home. That is enough." Inside the package was a silver locket on a delicate chain. Katherine opened it to find a tiny sketch inside, a remarkably detailed drawing of the ranch house. "I am not much of an artist," Kieran said, "but I wanted you to have something to remind you of what you built." "It is perfect." Katherine fastened it around her neck, then kissed him. "Thank you." "Marry me," Kieran said suddenly. Katherine pulled back, startled. "What?" "I know it is fast. I know we have been through a lot, but I love you, Katherine, and I want to spend my life building this ranch with you. Marry me." "Yes," Katherine said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married in January of 1883 in a simple ceremony at the ranch with just a few close friends present. Katherine wore a simple blue dress, and Kieran wore his best clothes, and they exchanged vows on the land they both loved. "I promise to be your partner," Kieran said, holding her hands, "to work beside you, to support your dreams, to love you through every season." "I promise to trust you," Katherine replied, "to build a life with you that is honest and true, to love you with everything I am." The kiss they shared as husband and wife was witnessed by a handful of people, but it felt like the whole world was celebrating with them. The years that followed were not always easy. Running a ranch never was. But Katherine and Kieran built something extraordinary together. They expanded their cattle operation, hired more hands, and became known throughout Nevada as one of the most successful ranches in the territory. In March of 1884, Katherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Fletcher. She went into labor during a spring storm, with wind howling around the house and rain lashing the windows. The midwife from town barely made it in time. "You are doing so well," Kieran kept saying, holding her hand through the pain. "So strong, so brave." When James finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Kieran wept openly. "He is perfect," he said, cradling the tiny bundle. "You are perfect." Katherine had never seen him so tender. Kieran became a devoted father, rising in the night for feedings, carrying James everywhere in a sling so Katherine could rest. Watching him with their son, Katherine fell in love all over again. 2 years later, in November of 1886, their daughter Elizabeth was born. This time the birth was easier, faster, and Elizabeth came into the world with a lusty cry that announced her personality from the start. "She is going to be trouble," the midwife predicted with a laugh. "Good," Katherine said, exhausted but happy. "The world needs more trouble from women." Life settled into a rhythm. Katherine managed the business side of the ranch, while Kieran oversaw the cattle and land. They made decisions together, argued sometimes, but always came back to the fundamental respect and love they had for each other. Their children grew up on horseback, learning the land and the work from both parents. By 1890, the ranch was thriving. They had 300 head of cattle, 10 full-time hands, and a reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock. Katherine was known throughout Nevada as a shrewd businesswoman who could negotiate with anyone. Kieran was respected as a cattleman who knew the land better than most men who had been born to it. One evening in September of 1890, 8 years after that terrible night when Katherine had overheard her first husband's betrayal, she and Kieran sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. James was 6 now, tall for his age, with his father's blonde hair. Elizabeth was nearly 4, fearless and wild, always covered in dirt. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Katherine asked. "All the time," Kieran admitted. "If you had not caught Richard that night, if I had not been here to help, if any number of small things had gone differently, I would have lost everything. Maybe, or maybe you would have found another way. You are the strongest person I know, Katherine. You would have survived." "But I would not have found you," she leaned against him. "That is the real loss that could have been." "But it was not." He kissed the top of her head. "We found each other. We built this, and we are not done yet. What more could we want? How about another couple 100 acres to the east? That Jameson property is going up for sale." Katherine laughed, always thinking bigger. "I learned from the best. They did buy the Jameson property, expanding their ranch to 500 acres. In 1892, Katherine gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas. The birth was harder than the previous 2, and the doctor warned them it might be dangerous to have more children. Katherine was 36, and while women had babies later, the risks increased. 3 is perfect," Kieran assured her. "We have everything we need." And it was true. Their family was complete, their ranch was prosperous, and their love had only deepened with time. Katherine looked back on those terrible days in September of 1882 as the beginning of her real life, the moment when everything changed for the better. Word of Richard reached them occasionally through travelers and letters. He had remarried, moved to California, failed at several business ventures. Katherine felt nothing but distant pity when she heard. He had been given every advantage and squandered them all, while she had fought for every inch of success and built something lasting. In June of 1895, they held a celebration for the ranch's 15th anniversary. Katherine counted from the day she and Richard had first broken ground, because those early years were part of her story too. The party drew people from all over the county, neighbors and friends and business partners who had watched Katherine transform from Richard Bishop's overlooked wife to Katherine Fletcher, rancher and businesswoman in her own right. "Speech!" someone called as the sun began to set over the gathered crowd. Katherine stood on the porch, Kieran beside her, their 3 children arranged around them. She looked out at the faces, some friendly from the start, others who had doubted her and been proven wrong. 15 years ago," she began, "I stood on this land for the first time and saw possibility. Not everyone believed in that possibility, including me some days. But I learned that belief is less important than work, less important than refusing to give up, less important than finding people who will stand with you when everything seems lost." She reached for Kieran's hand. This ranch was built by many hands and much sweat. It was built on honesty and fair dealing, and the belief that the land gives back what you put into it. I am proud of what we have created here, not just a successful business, but a home, a place where our children can grow up knowing that anything is possible if you are willing to fight for it. The applause was genuine, warm. After the speech, people came up to offer congratulations and share stories. Katherine heard herself laughed more than once, saw Kieran's pride in his eyes, watched her children run wild with the other young ones. "I never thought I could be this happy," she murmured to Kieran as they danced later that evening, a fiddle player providing music under the stars. "You deserve it," he replied. "You fought for it. We fought for it. Then we deserve it together." The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and cattle drives, by children growing and the land providing. James proved to have his mother's head for business and spent hours in the ranch office learning to keep books and negotiate deals. Elizabeth was a natural with horses, fearless and intuitive. Thomas, the youngest, loved the land itself, always exploring, collecting rocks and plants, asking endless questions about how things grew. In 1898, when Katherine was 42 and Kieran was 44, they sat down to discuss the future. "The children are old enough now to start learning real responsibility," Kieran said. "James could handle more of the business side, take some weight off you. And Elizabeth should be learning actual ranch management, not just how to ride fast and break colts." They both glanced at Thomas, who was 12 and more interested in his rock collection than cattle. "Thomas will find his path," Katherine said. "We do not all have to love the same things." True enough. Kieran leaned back in his chair, studying her. What about you, Katherine? What do you want for the next chapter? It was a good question. Katherine had spent so many years just surviving, then building, then maintaining. What did she want now that the foundation was solid? I want to help other women, she said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. Women like I was, trapped in bad marriages or struggling to make their own way. We could hire more women, teach them the business, give them a path to independence. I like that, Kieran smiled. We could start a program, bring in women who need work and training, pay them fair wages, teach them everything from ranching to bookkeeping. People will talk. They always do. We have never cared before. So they started what they called the Women's Ranch Program, bringing in widows and women escaping bad situations, teaching them skills that would allow them to support themselves. It started small, just 2 women that first year, but word spread. By 1900, they had helped more than a dozen women find their footing, either by hiring them permanently or training them and helping them find positions elsewhere. One of those women was a young widow named Sarah with a baby daughter. She arrived in the spring of 1900, worn down and desperate. I can work hard, she told Katherine during the interview. I just need a chance. Katherine saw herself in Sarah's eyes, that same determination mixed with fear. You will get your chance here. We will teach you everything you need to know. Sarah became one of their best workers, eventually managing their expanded chicken and egg operation. Her daughter grew up playing with the Fletcher children, becoming like family. This is your greatest legacy, Kieran told Katherine one evening, watching Sarah teach another new woman how to handle the books. Not just the ranch, but the lives you have changed. We changed them together, Katherine corrected, as she always did. Together, Kieran agreed. In the summer of 1902, James turned 18 and announced he wanted to go to college in San Francisco to study business. I love the ranch, he told his parents, but I want to learn how to make it even better. Modern practices, new ways of marketing, connections with buyers in the city. Katherine felt a pang at the thought of him leaving, but also pride. Her son was thinking bigger, wanting more, just as she had taught him. Go, she said. Learn everything you can. The ranch will be here when you get back. Elizabeth, at 16, had no interest in college. I want to work here, she declared. Learn from Dad, become the best cattlewoman in Nevada. You're already halfway there, Kieran told her with a grin. Thomas, at 14, surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to study geology. I want to understand what is under the land, he explained, why things grow where they grow, what makes the soil rich or poor. Maybe I could help the ranch that way. Education is always worthwhile, Katherine said. Whatever path you choose, we support you. Watching her children become their own people, with their own dreams and ambitions, Katherine felt the circle completing. She had started with nothing but determination, built something lasting, and now her children were taking it further than she had ever imagined. In October of 1904, Katherine turned 48 and Kieran 50. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them riding out to the creek where he had first kissed her all those years ago. 22 years since that terrible night, Katherine said, dismounting to sit by the water, when I thought my life was ending. And it was, Kieran said, joining her. That old life ended so a better one could begin. I used to be so angry at Richard, but now I almost feel grateful. If he had not betrayed me, I never would have found you. I think we would have found each other eventually. Some things are meant to be. Do you believe that? In fate? I believe in you and me. I believe in what we built together. Call it fate or luck or stubbornness. It does not matter. What matters is we did not give up. Katherine leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of the man she loved. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water flow and the cottonwoods shed their golden leaves. What do you think about when you look at this place? Kieran asked. I think about possibility, Katherine said. I think about how nothing is ever really lost if you are willing to fight for it. I think about how love and work can transform everything. She turned to him. What do you think about? I think about how lucky I am, how one decision to take a job at a small ranch changed my entire life, how the best thing I ever did was help a brave woman save what was hers. It became ours. It was always yours. I just got to be part of it. They returned to the house as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Smoke rose from the chimney and lights glowed in the windows. Their home, their legacy, their life together. The years from 1905 to 1910 brought more changes. James returned from college with new ideas that helped modernize the ranch. They installed better fencing, improved their breeding stock, and established direct relationships with buyers in San Francisco and beyond. Elizabeth married one of their longtime ranch hands, a good man named Daniel, who loved the land as much as she did. They built a house on the eastern section of the property and started their own family. Thomas went to college in Carson City to study geology and agriculture, returning every summer to apply what he learned. His insights into soil composition and water management improved their yields and helped them weather several dry years that broke other ranches. Katherine and Kieran eased back from the day-to-day operations, letting their children and trusted managers handle more. But they never fully retired. The ranch was in their blood, part of who they were. In the spring of 1912, Katherine's 30th anniversary of arriving at the ranch, they threw another celebration. This one was even bigger than the last, with people coming from all over Nevada and even some from California. The ranch had become legendary, not just for its success, but for the story behind it. "You are an inspiration," more than one woman told Katherine that day. "You showed us it was possible to make our own way." Katherine deflected the praise, as always, but privately she was proud. She had not just saved a ranch, she had changed lives, including her own. That evening, after the guests had left and the cleanup was done, Katherine and Kieran took their familiar ride to the creek. They were both in their 50s now, slower than they used to be, but still strong, still capable. 30 years, Katherine said. "It feels like a lifetime and also like no time at all." "The best 30 years of my life," Kieran said. "Every single one of them." "Even the hard ones?" "Especially the hard ones. They made the good ones better." They sat by the water as the stars came out, talking about the past and the future, about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and all it had become. "Do you have any regrets?" Katherine asked. Kieran thought about it. "I regret that it took your pain to bring us together. I wish you could have been happy from the start. But then I would not have appreciated this as much. Everything I went through made me who I am." "Then no," Kieran said. "No regrets." "Me neither." By 1915, Katherine was 59 and Kieran 61. They had been married 32 years, together even longer if you counted from that first moment of alliance. The ranch sprawled across nearly 1,000 acres now, one of the largest and most respected operations in Nevada. Their children ran most of it, with James handling business, Elizabeth managing cattle, and Thomas overseeing land and water resources. Katherine and Kieran spent their days doing lighter work, mending tack, working in the garden Katherine had expanded over the years, playing with their growing number of grandchildren. Elizabeth had 3 children now, James had 2, and Thomas had recently married and was expecting his first. "Wow. We are going to run out of space," Kieran joked, watching the grandchildren race around the yard one afternoon. "Good," Katherine said. "This place should be full of life and noise and chaos. That is what we built it for." One evening in late summer, Katherine found a letter in her desk she had not seen in years. It was from her father, written just before he died, telling her how proud he was of what she had accomplished. "You took what I gave you and made it into something far greater than I ever imagined," he had written. "You have a strength I did not fully appreciate when you were young. I see it now. You are extraordinary, my daughter. Never forget that." Katherine had read this letter many times, but it still brought tears to her eyes. She had been so focused on surviving that first marriage, on meeting her father's expectations, that she had not let herself be extraordinary. It took losing everything to find out what she was really capable of. "What are you reading?" Kieran asked, coming into the office. "Old letters, old memories." He read over her shoulder, then kissed the top of her head. "Your father was right. You are extraordinary. Only because you were there to help me see it." "No, you always were. I just got to witness it." In December of 1916, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch house, now expanded with additional rooms to accommodate everyone. They ate Catherine's famous roast, shared stories and laughter, and felt the weight of all they had built together. "Tell us the story," one of the grandchildren asked, "about how Grandma saved the ranch." Katherine and Kieran exchanged glances. They had told this story before, but never tired of it. It was their origin story, the foundation of everything else. "It was September of 1882, Katherine began, as she always did, "and I heard something I was never supposed to hear." She told about the overheard conversation, the discovery of Richard's betrayal, the desperate ride to Virginia City, and the negotiations that saved everything. She told about Kieran's help, his steady presence, the way they became partners before they became anything else. Kieran picked up the story to talk about the lien, the confrontation, the moment when everything could have gone either way. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever met," he told the children. "She refused to give up, even when the law and society were against her. She taught me what real strength looks like." "And your grandfather showed me that partnership is possible," Katherine added. "That love does not have to be about one person controlling another. We built this together, every step of the way." The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard it before. It never got old, this story of courage and love and refusing to accept defeat. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Katherine and Kieran sat by the fireplace with blankets wrapped around their shoulders. "Do you think we did enough?" Katherine asked. "Left them enough to build on?" "Look around," Kieran said, gesturing to the house full of sleeping family. "We left them everything, land, opportunity, the knowledge that they can overcome anything. What more could we give? I just want them to be happy. They will be. We showed them how." The years continued, each one bringing new challenges and joys. There were droughts and floods, booms and busts in the cattle market, illnesses and losses. But through it all, Katherine and Kieran faced everything together, their partnership as strong as ever. In 1920, Katherine turned 64 and Kieran 66. They were slowing down now, feeling their age in aching joints and shorter days. But their minds were still sharp, their love still deep. 38 years married, Katherine said on their anniversary that January. "Longer than I thought I would live." "Do not talk like that," Kieran said, but he was smiling. "You will outlive us all. Only if you are with me." They had settled into a comfortable routine, rising with the sun but no longer working from dawn until dusk. They took long walks together, read in the evenings, spent time with their grandchildren. The ranch ran smoothly without their constant oversight, managed by their capable children and the good people they had hired over the years. One afternoon in May of 1922, Katherine stood on the porch looking out at the land she had fought so hard to keep. Kieran came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How strange life is." She leaned back against him. "I was so scared that night in 1882. I thought I was losing everything, but I was actually about to gain everything that mattered. We gained it together. Yes, together." They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun move across the sky, watching cattle graze in distant pastures, watching their legacy unfold before them. "I love you," Katherine said. "I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I can ever express." "I know," Kieran replied. "I have always known, and I love you just as much." Their love had not been sudden or dramatic. It had grown slowly, carefully, built on respect and partnership and shared struggle. But it was deep and true and lasting, the kind of love that withstands everything life throws at it. In September of 1922, 40 years to the month after that fateful night, Katherine and Kieran took a ride to the creek one last time. They were older now, moved slower, but they could still make the journey. 40 years, Katherine said, dismounting carefully. "I can hardly believe it. The best 40 years imaginable." They sat by the water, remembering the struggles and triumphs, the fear and joy, the building and growing. All of it had led to this moment, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built something extraordinary in the light. "Thank you," Katherine said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I could not see myself, for standing with me when you could have walked away, for loving me when I felt unlovable." "Katherine." Kieran took her hands, his grip still strong despite the years. "You were always worthy of love. You were always remarkable. I was just lucky enough to be there when you realized it yourself." They kissed, soft and sweet, 40 years of love in a single moment. The ride back to the ranch was slow, peaceful. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows across the land. Smoke rose from the chimney of the ranch house, and they could hear children's laughter in the distance. "This is what we built," Katherine said. "This is what we built together," Kieran corrected gently. They dismounted at the barn where their oldest grandchild, Elizabeth's daughter Sarah, was grooming a horse. "Grandma, Grandpa," she called out, "did you have a nice ride?" "The best," Katherine told her, pulling the young woman into a hug. That night the whole family gathered for dinner, as they did every Sunday. The table was crowded and loud, multiple conversations happening at once, children wiggling in their seats, laughter bouncing off the walls. Katherine looked around at all the faces, these people who existed because she had refused to give up on a September night 40 years ago. "What does that look for?" James asked her. "I'm just happy," Katherine said simply. "So very happy." After dinner, Katherine and Kieran retired to their room, a comfortable space they had shared for decades. They got ready for bed in companionable silence, a routine as familiar as breathing. "Another good day," Kieran said, climbing into bed beside her. "Another good life," Katherine replied, settling against his shoulder. They fell asleep like that, together, as they had for 39 years of marriage and would for however many years remained. The ranch continued to thrive. Katherine and Kieran lived to see their great-grandchildren born, to see the ranch expand even further, to see the legacy they built reach into a new generation. They both lived well into their 70s, a remarkable age for people who had worked as hard as they had. When Katherine finally passed in her sleep in the spring of 1930 at age 74, she was surrounded by family, her hand held firmly in Kieran's. He followed her 6 months later, unable to imagine a life without his partner, his love, his Katherine. They were buried on the ranch, overlooking the land they had saved and built together. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, to tell their story, to promise that the legacy would continue. "They taught us that love is about partnership," James said at the funeral, "that anything is possible if you refuse to give up, that the greatest strength comes from standing together." The Fletcher Ranch continued for generations, always known as the place where a brave woman and a steadfast man built something lasting from near ruin. The story of Katherine and Kieran was told and retold, becoming family legend and then local history. But the real story was simpler than the legends. It was about two people who found each other in difficult circumstances and chose to build something better. It was about respect and partnership and love that grew deeper with each passing year. It was about refusing to accept defeat and fighting for what mattered. It was about a woman who caught her husband planning to sell their ranch and a cowboy who helped her stop him and start fresh. But more than that, it was about two people who built a life and a love that lasted forever, together.